election may be over, but feelings are still running pretty high. Chances are you've got relatives on both sides of the political spectrum. So how do you get through the holidays without carving each other up? Well, joining me now is Dr. Kamala Glenn Taylor, Director of Clinical Services at Brentwood Hospital in Shreveport. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
This is a tense topic. A lot of feelings. A lot of people still have some very strong emotions of going through the election, especially if maybe their candidate lost. And it was a very hard-fought election.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about how we can address those emotions within ourselves.
Sounds good.
What's the best way?
Well, first and foremost, I think it is so important for people to actually pause and reflect on what they're actually feeling. For some people, you might be experiencing things like anger, or that might be the initial kind of emotional response. For some people, it could be excitement, whatever the case might be. But it's really important to pause and reflect and really try to identify what it is that I am feeling. Oftentimes, I think as we're going through situations that might be challenging for us, we tend to lead with that primary emotional experience, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what we're really experiencing inside.
Do you think that this election in particular was a little different, a little more unique, and maybe emotionally charged for many folks?
Absolutely so. I think in a lot of ways there was more going on this time around. There are individuals who are thinking about it from a women's perspective. What happens to my rights? There are some people who are thinking about it from the perspective of, well, I'm an immigrant to this country. What does this mean for me? There are people who are thinking about it from the perspective of, well, I'm a person of color, or I'm a minority. What does this mean for me? So it was very nuanced. I think no matter what side of it you were on, that ultimately the outcome resulted in quite a number of different emotions and thoughts and experiences.
And then we're going to put all of those thoughts and emotions and experiences at one table together this week.
Indeed we are. Thanksgiving.
So how can we avoid any escalation between family members?
So I think it's important for people to first of all personally reflect and see if this is something that I can manage. There's some people who come from families who they might be on different sides of the political fence, but they're able to come together and have honest discussions, open discussions without walking away with feelings hurt. There are other people who don't come from those families. And so it's a matter of that perspective of recognizing what it is that's going on in my family dynamic and whether or not we can manage it together. The self-reflection also comes from, am I the person who tends to carry the argument that doesn't let it go, or am I the person that gets swept away in it? So it's determining where I am in that dynamic, and then based on that, deciding where I need to be.
So what do you do if unavoidable? There's some escalation and there is something that's getting swept away, the argument's kicking up. Yeah. What's your best advice for us?
First advice is, if you can walk away from it. Take some time for yourself to just check out of that conversation. Sometimes we try to engage in order for somebody else to think differently or do something differently, and sometimes somebody is not in that place. And so if I have the ability to just take a step back and say, you know, I'm going to disengage for right now because this conversation doesn't seem to be going anywhere, I think that's absolutely appropriate.
Okay, some really good suggestions there. And if you know that you have one of those families that's going to be at odds no matter what, would you recommend maybe skipping the holiday and sitting this one out?
I'm going to tell people that to take that one on a case-by-case basis. And what I want to say to people as well is people over politics, right? Mm-hmm. So if it is that your family is in that category, if we just don't know how to not argue around the holidays and you're not certain of what steps to take, determine for yourself, maybe have a pre-conversation with family members about how do we want to handle that. Do we see ourselves being able to approach this differently, and then make your decision from there. But case by case, for sure.
Some really good advice here, you know, not just for the upcoming holiday, but definitely for Christmas and those other holidays that are right around the corner.
Yes.
And even day-to-day life.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your expertise and your time.
Thank you for having me.